Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and Peter Navarro has had it with the hackery that is mainstream media. He absolutely obliterates this ridiculous reporter, and well, let's just dive in.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Peter. And just given this appeals court temporarily reinstating the tariffs, what does that mean for you and your position? And does it buy the administration more time, in your view?
Me and my, you're not talking about me personally. You're talking about the administration.
The administration, of course.
Yeah. So, look, the tariffs remain in place. The court told us, they didn't all but tell us, they told us, go do it another way. So you can assume that even if we lose, we will do it another way. And I can assure the American people that the Trump tariff agenda is alive, well, healthy, and will be implemented to protect you, to save your jobs and your factories, and to stop shipping foreign wealth, our wealth, into foreign hands.
So you are working on a plan B
Of
right
course. No, there's no plan B. It's plan A. Okay? Plan A encompasses all strategic options, and when we move forward, we had a full view of what the battlefield looks like. We are not naive about rogue justices in the judiciary and Democrats filing lawsuits. This has got to stop, by the way. This weaponization of the judiciary to stop President Trump from doing what he promised the American people. This has got to stop. It's the people of America have the lowest level of confidence in the American judiciary they've had in 100 years. And it's getting close to what they think about Congress. And that's a low bar to hit.
How much of that is because every time you get a court decision you don't like, you and your colleagues come out here and rail against rogue judges?
Who is this guy? Tell me who you are, sir.
I'm Andrew Feinberg. I work for The Independent.
Okay, so that is such a biased question. That is not a journalist question. That was like an op-ed, sir. So I don't even respond to that. Who else has got an intel? Yes, ma'am.
Peter, I wanted to ask you, what do the conversations look like right now with other countries as you're seeing the courts pushing back here in the United States?
Well, great question. In fact, that is the question in many ways. This morning, we were getting plenty of phone calls from countries saying, we saw the ruling, so what? We're going to continue to negotiate in good faith because we understand that there's a problem, and based on that court decision, we understand that court decision is not going to stop you from doing what you need to do, so we're going to work with you. So I can assure you, and by the way, there's going to be within the next, I don't know, say a few days, because that puts me too much on the spot, but you will see a cascade of new deals coming out in the near future, and these will all be good for the American people. Okay, yes, sir.
On the Nippon Steel, U.S. Steel deal.
Let's stay on the tariffs thing.
Well, it actually is related to that.
How is that related?
It looks like we have the framework of an agreement that involves some kind of U.S. involvement in the company. A Japanese firm gets
some kind of U.S. involvement in the company? No, U.S. Steel owns the company. The Nippon Steel is going to have some involvement, but no control of the company. I don't want to tell you because, hey, look, today is tariff day. Tomorrow I'll come back out and we'll talk about it. Yes, ma'am.
You're talking about other things that the courts are asking you to do, like Section 122 and 301.
The court didn't ask us to do it. They pointed out that we have other ways to do that, which is kind of curious that they would do that. But I think the fact is that they know that their ruling is on soft ground, and they just want to make it clear that the president does have broad authorities to do what he's trying to do for the American people. Finish question.
Will you pursue those in parallel paths, or will you wait till the court ruling is played out?
I defer to our great United States Trade Representative Jamison Greer on that. I'm sure he'll be out in front of these cameras and with press releases trying to explain that matter.
Reporters are starting to learn the hard way now, aren't they? Some are smart enough to know how to play ball, some are smart enough to know how to handle themselves, but others, like this goon from the Independent, which, by the way, if it's the Independent I'm thinking of, that means it's a UK reporter, or it's from the United Kingdom. So we don't really care what they have to say, because, you know, USAID was the #2 funder for the BBC, so there's always that going on. And most of these journalists have figured out how to play ball, how to ask questions that are on topic, and staying on certain messages. And I at least appreciate that, but the reality is, we don't hate journalists enough. The vast majority of these people are ambulance-chasing, muck-raking people that have nothing better to do than to stir up controversy so they can sell more newspapers. That is a borderline evil thing to do. We talk about lawyers. You know, what's the difference between a catfish and a lawyer? One's a scum-sucking bottom dweller and the other's a fish. We used to talk about lawyers in that way, but can we start doing it to journalists? There are good ones out there, like, for instance, someone that I disagree with quite a lot, Matt Taibbi, but I have a huge amount of respect for him because he was instrumental in the Twitter files. This dude was instrumental in finding out where the Bush administration was going crazy. He was also instrumental in finding very clandestine things about Barack Obama, so I appreciate that sort of journalism. All the president's men, that's journalism. This question, when you're asking, because here's the question that was being asked, was, well, once you get a ruling that you don't like, how do y'all know how to deal with that? Yeah, the only thing that I want loaded is mashed potatoes, all right? I don't want loaded questions. Man, I really am getting hungry. But the reality is, you can't ask crap like that. You don't do it like that. You ask the question somewhere along the lines of, hey, how are y'all planning to handle more of these potential court battles? Something along those lines. That is a good question that could put someone like Peter Navarro on the back foot. But this journalist doesn't. He makes it about the Trump administration in a broad spectrum and not relegating his question to the person really being asked. Okay? That's when you know you've overstepped. It's like dealing with umpires in the major leagues. You don't say, you missed the call, Mr. Umpire. That was clearly a strike. You turn your head, you don't turn it towards the umpire, and you go, rough call, or something along those lines. You don't call out the umpire to his face. You don't do it, or else you get tossed. And as fun as it was watching Bobby Cox come out and kick the dirt on the umpires like they deserved, it still wound up as a fine for him. But there's no fine for these journalists, other than views, which then gets even more thorny. Because the very people that this dude is trying to sell a headline to are the very people who need the truth the most. Rich white liberals consume this nonsense like it's some sort of slop. They eat it like Jell-O pudding. And they don't question what's in it, and the moment that it tastes a little bit funky, they riot. Currently, what we're watching is Jake Tapper's been making the rounds with a whole bunch of other news organizations. He was recently on Megyn Kelly, on her podcast, and she called him out for basically not having the guts to admit and reveal to the public at the time that Joe Biden had lost his mind. All right, and he was not sharp as attack. As a matter of fact, he was starting to show some real signs of just degraded aging to the point where his mind was mush. You talk about koalas and smooth brains, and then you have Joe Biden right next to it. And I'm not saying that to insult the man. I'm not saying doing that to insult a president. I'm saying the fact was that his brain was gone by the end of 2020. Okay? It was official. We couldn't deny it anymore, or at least Jake Tapper couldn't deny it anymore, after Joe Biden had his fall from his bicycle spill, but apparently it was even worse behind the scenes. See, a good journalist would reveal that information ahead of time. A good journalist would have the guts to say it, but the reality is, Jake Tapper wasn't allowed to talk about this topic. What he was allowed to do, however, was make as much mud as he can to sling at now President Donald Trump. That was his job. So there isn't a journalism here in the United States. There's muckraking. The real journalists are more often than not independent. They're the ones that are doing the unsung heroes. They're the ones doing the real work. Guys like this, however, try to make a story all about them, and they wonder why Peter Navarro turns around and starts yapping back. I don't blame him one bit. You overstepped, and if you were in a Major League Baseball game, you would get thrown out, and your own team would probably be cheering that. Because you don't need to be thrown out of a place like the White House Correspondents Circle. You don't need to do that in order to get a headline. But this dude was probably an inch away from losing his press pass because he couldn't keep a question to simple parameters. Okay? He refused to play inside the boundary lines that the vast majority of journalists in that circle actually can play by. They know what the rules are. They know how they're supposed to act. And instead, this dude is kicking dirt. He's screaming at the umpire. And he's wondering why he's about to get tossed. This is not what journalism is supposed to look like. And the UK has a little bit of a different version of journalism. They are way more tabloid. They're crazier than the tabloids we have in our supermarkets. It's nuts over there in the UK. But we don't need that kind of insanity here in the States. Here, you're supposed to do your job, and you're supposed to play by the same rules that all the other journalists are doing. Because you'll notice that Peter Navarro only calls out one guy. He answers all the other questions and answers them pretty well. But yeah, that's the state of journalism, folks. It's going to get a little bit worse before it gets better. But maybe one day, we'll reveal exactly why Jake Tapper wasn't allowed to release the footage about Joe Biden through his book Original Sin. I know I sound like a shill for the book, but that's the reality. We need to report the truth, ladies and gentlemen. And this dude, simply put, is not doing it here. Good for Peter Navarro. Throw him out, bring in Bobby Cox. I want a show. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. Till then, y'all have a good one.